Warning, this episode contains graphic content that may be disturbing for some of our listeners.
Well, they say if you can make it there, you can make it anywhere. New York, New York. From tailing mobsters like John Gotti and Tommy Karate to meeting up with yet another baseball Hall of Famer and getting Mickey Mantle's autograph. It's all part of Harry Trombitas' New York experience. I'm Clark Donley, along with Jessie Hemmelgarn and retired FBI Special Agent Harry Trombitas, off the record, an FBI agent's perspective. Harry, take us across the river and through the tunnels and the bridges to the Big Apple.
Oh yeah, what an experience, guys. I knew all along that there was a good chance I'd probably end up in New York. That's where a lot of agents were going and where they really needed the most agents. So wasn't surprised when I got my orders to go to New York. And, once, I recovered from my shock and everything, it occurred to me that I needed to start getting ready to make the transition to New York from St. Louis. So one of the good things that the Bureau does, or did at that time, I'm sure it's probably a little different now, but they send you and your wife or your significant other on a 5-day house hunting trip to the office that you're going to. Now, if you know where you want to live and you know, maybe even the neighborhood that you want to live, it's not that difficult. But when you have absolutely no idea where you want to live in the New York area, we're talking about Connecticut, New Jersey, Pennsylvania. So
The options are endless.
And unfortunately, you can't just spend a couple of days in each location. So you've really got to trim it down. And I remember Barb and I had managed to scrape together $15,000, and we were both so proud of the fact that we had this much money that we could, go with us. And I had visions of us living in a palatial estate along the Henry Hudson River, and I had no concept of how expensive New York was. And keep in mind that at the time, there was no cost of living adjustment for agents living in or working in New York versus maybe somebody working in Columbus or some other location, a smaller city.
Really?
We all made the same amount of money. And
Oh, boy.
yeah. So, a salary that may be very comfortable in one city like Columbus, you're living out of a box in New York City. So
No wonder it wasn't like the place to be.
yeah, well, seriously, a lot of marriages broke up because the wife had a good job in the city that they were in, and they liked it there. And now all of a sudden the husband, or vice versa, if the husband has a good job in the city that they're living in and the wife gets transferred, there are a lot of people that couldn't come to an understanding. And there were a lot of divorces that happened because of that. But I had told Barb all along that New York was a real option, and she was okay with that. So, not happy about it, of course, but, she would live with it. So anyway, we go on our 5-day house hunting trip, meet with a realtor, and she's basically said, where would you like to live? And I said, well, we have $15,000 to put down on a place. And she goes, $15,000? That won't even pay closing costs.
Oh,
I'm
jeez.
like, oh, well, we don't have any more money. And she goes, well, you're going to have to live, way south in New Jersey, like Neptune or Freehold, and beyond, which are an hour and a half to 2 hours away
Wow.
from New York City. And she said, we can start off there and see what we can find. So we go down to South Jersey, and we're looking around, and it was astonishing what we saw. It was horrific. There were neighborhoods that I wouldn't dare try to live in, um, where we could afford a house. We went into one house and it almost made Barb cry. Um, we had to go in through the back door. There's something wrong with the front door. And when we opened up the back door and went into the kitchen, and literally there was no floor in the kitchen. We could see
What?
the dirt
Oh,
on the ground. And I mean, it just was a stark realization of what we were facing in that. And that we spent 3 days trying to look around and see if there was some place that we could live comfortably, or, at least survive in. And the real estate agent said, if you go out to Pennsylvania, they have some locations in the Pocono Mountains there that, it's going to be a 2-hour drive for you, but
wow.
you'll find a much, much better house in the Poconos than you will down here in South Jersey and that. So we decided to spend our last 2 days on our house hunting trip out in Pennsylvania. We hooked up with a realtor, and she took us around, and she showed us this one neighborhood that was outside of Stroudsburg, near Tannersville. And it was just everything that we imagined that we would want to live in. It was a nice neighborhood, kind of in a wooded area. Um, the cost of the house was very reasonable. So we were able to use our $15,000 allotment to help take a little bit of chunk of, the cost of moving out. And it was in a great neighborhood. The schools were decent. So on the 5th day, literally, we put an offer in on the house, and sure enough, it was accepted. So we now had a house to live in. So all of that occurred, and I'm thinking that I have to work out how am I going to get into the office. I'm almost 2 hours away, over 90 miles away, and how do most agents um, manage to get into their office and that, and they, commute in. And what I found out was most agents would share a car. And so you had to pick up maybe 3 or 4 other agents in the morning and then head into Manhattan, where 26 Federal, where the office was. So I'm thinking I'm going to have to try to find a way to, get connected with some agents maybe that either lived out in New Jersey, out, on the west side of Jersey, or other agents maybe that lived in Pennsylvania. And then I got a call from a supervisor in New York who was assigned. He was in charge of a surveillance squad, special operations too. I found out that there were 15 surveillance squads in New York. 3 of them were criminal. A couple were electronic related squads. Several of them were foreign counterintelligence related squads. And so together there were about 15. They all had their own offsite place to go that served as your office, rather than we were going to be undercover, so we would not be allowed to go into the main office in Manhattan. But the good thing was that you got your own car, and that sounded perfect for me. I would have my own car. I could come and go. Yeah, it was going to be a long commute, but at least I would be able to get, I would have to spend money on my own. I'd like drive into New York and pay for parking and all those kinds of things. So it sounded really good. So I checked it out, found out it was a pretty good job. And so on Monday, December 30th of 1985, I had my first day in the New York office, and our squad offsite was located in Tarrytown, New York, which is it's north of New York City, um, and it's along the Henry Hudson River. And the day that I started happened to be an administrative day where all the agents were at the offsite, and there were 3 teams of 6 agents, so about 18 agents plus a supervisor met at this offsite. And it was the day that you did your paperwork. We called it it was our imprest. What that is basically is when you travel around in New York, especially back in 1985, every time you went through a tunnel or you crossed a bridge following one of your bad guys, you had to pay. You have to, have a token or something to pay for crossing. We couldn't exactly badge our way through the tolls on that. First of all, there weren't that many paid tolls where they had officers working. So most of them were automatic, where you threw the coin in or the token in and then the gate would open. So we didn't have that option. And certainly if you're following behind a bad guy, the last thing you want is for them to see you badging, somebody to let you through. So
A
we
verbal
had
loan.
yeah. And nothing to see here, guys. So we had to buy tokens and coupons ahead of time so that it would speed our trip, and if we didn't have those things, our bad guy, which mostly would be prepared to cross that bridge or that particular go through that tunnel, they would most likely have their own tokens and things. And so it was just you pull up to the thing, you throw your token in the basket, and you're off. And if you didn't have those things ready, they would be so far ahead of you, might not ever be able to find them. There was so much traffic in that. So anyway, that was the administrative day that we would go in and fill out our imprest and submit it to the office. Of course, it would always be verified. It had to correspond with the surveillance that you did. So if you said you crossed the George Washington Bridge one day, you had to be able to show on your surveillance log that you went across the GWB and so on and so forth. So they did check to make sure you were padding your vouchers and that. So it was pretty closely checked. So everything
You
was
you had
legitimate.
to sacrifice a lot as an agent. Well, we all know about the safety. We all know the sacrifices that agents make in regards to safety, and surveillance was a tough one. We'll get to that. But your family had to sacrifice and move around quite a bit, and even some family time too with you and your long commute and other agents who had a long commute. And you're also sacrificing some of your own personal funds too that might not get reimbursed. And I think that's a thing a lot of people don't know about working for the agency too.
Yeah, you're right. There's a lot of things that agents do. They pay for it out of their own money, either because it makes the job easier for them, or it's equipment that they might need that the Bureau doesn't supply. And we'll buy it out of our own pockets and that, and won't even get reimbursed for it. So yeah, there's a lot of personal money that's being spent on the job, but you know what? You didn't complain. You knew the job, this is a job that you love, one you dreamed about, and you can't go in there complaining, or they'll stick you on some kind of squad that you don't want to be on. And so you keep your mouth shut and you just do the job. And you do make little sacrifices as far as the teams go, and your family life. I always tried to make time to coach my kids' teams if I could. Generally, I was able to carve out some time every day, spend with the kids. So they would remember who in the heck daddy was. and just um, take advantage of the time that I did have off to do fun things with the kids, like go skiing or, go hiking or just little things like that, play sports. So when you have very little free time because of your job, if family is important to you, you definitely will find a way to spend the time in that. So I remember being issued a official FBI car, camera kit, a Kell tactical flashlight, because a lot of the work that we did would be at night, and I need a good flashlight. Also, it could serve as, a club or something if I was in a fight or whatever I needed to help with my personal safety in that. It would definitely get somebody's attention. I had an undercover bulletproof vest. Um, Most of the vests at the time were white colored, um, the bulletproof vest, but this one that we had as an undercover agent was a denim jacket. So picture a jean jacket with a bulletproof vest inside. So
Whoa, that's a fashion statement.
yeah,
Can you imagine? Like that'd be heavy.
actually, it was pretty cool at the time. I'm not saying it would go well
It
today.
could still be cool, fashion always goes in waves, right?
That's right. It's probably back somewhere. Um, I was given an undercover gas card that came back to our fictitious company name. So out every SO squad, surveillance squad, at our offsite, we would have a fictitious business name. And so that, people see in your particular industrial area, they see, that you had a business name and that you weren't just some group of guys, meeting every day or every week or whatever. So
Like a bunch of criminals.
exactly.
Did
So
you have a fake ID too?
yeah, and I was issued a New York State driver's license under a fictitious name. Uh,
Wow.
and
Hmm.
that was kind of disappointing to me in a way. The reason why we had to have it is because when we're on surveillance and we're following some of the organized crime guys around, some of the other bad guys as well, unfortunately, there were some smaller communities in that where there were what we call dirty cops. These are individuals that were somehow connected. They were paid by the mob to give them a heads up, if anything came to their attention that could have some kind of a bearing on their activities as organized crime people. And so if we would have gotten stopped in a local jurisdiction, for example, trying to where a bad guy lived, a mob guy lived, if we gave them if we badged them, told them we were with the FBI and that, probably as soon as we drove away, um, they'd be on the phone, letting the bad guys know that, hey, just so you know, the FBI is in town, and you guys need to watch it, or they were close to your house, so they may be watching you and that. And so we did have some dirty cops, just like there, have been in the past dirty FBI agents that have done different things that, uh, you know, um, I think of Robert Hansen, for example, that gave away a lot of our secrets in that. And, so, I don't want to imply in any way, shape, or form that the majority of cops that we dealt with in the New York area were dirty uh, in any way, shape, or form. 99.9% of them were fantastic. You know, I would they would give their life for you, and you do the same thing for them. I mean, I'm just talking about a very small percentage. And since you don't know who the dirty cops were, you had to assume that everybody was potentially would give away your information and that. So
It's just a precaution. a
Yeah.
safety precaution. And you had a lot of those in surveillance. What are some of the other ones that you had to do?
On the for surveillance, I
Yeah,
listened.
you had lots of different safety precautions that you need to do if you're covering surveillance. Not only fake IDs, fictitious business addresses, special equipment. What are some other things that you needed when you were on surveillance?
Well, certainly personal safety was always important. We were issued at the time revolvers, 357 Smith and Wesson revolvers. They fire 6 rounds, and that was the gun that we carried at the time. It wasn't until the shootout in Miami that we transitioned into um, Sig Sauer P226s, which carry 15 rounds and are semi-automatic. So this is even before that occurred. So we had a revolver that we used. We had every agent on surveillance had a shotgun, an 870 shotgun, and we kept them in the roof mount of our interior of the vehicle, covered, so it would blend in like part of the roof. And then we kept MP5 semi-automatic machine guns in the back of our trunks, and that in case we were in a particularly dangerous situation where we were going to make an arrest, or we believed that there was going to be a good chance that we might come under some kind of gunfire. So those are the things that we carried every day. We had we started carrying, obviously you can't have your revolver on your hip. So we purchased these at the time. They weren't that common. We called them fanny packs, fanny bags. And, you put your revolver in there and you put it around your waist. So, you'd see all the, it was probably obvious, but, but anybody with a fanny pack would probably be an agent. But no, they
Now you
were.
blend in perfectly. They're everywhere.
Yeah.
Well, and back then there were plenty of them around. So I don't mean to say that we were the only ones with them, but that was the only way we could really carry our handguns, unless you had like a shoulder holster inside your vest, but then you'd have to kind of do it with the fanny
Yeah,
pack.
not
There, you're ready to go. So I carried the fanny pack, but I did have a shoulder holster too when it was appropriate. So anyway, um, we would typically, our squad would be responsible for working on organized crime cases that were put together in the main office, and the case agents would want to have some intelligence about who some of the particular um, bad guys were meeting with, what the activity was about in that. So we would be given an assignment. I know sometimes, John Gotti at the time was active. He was now in charge of the Gambino family. Matter of fact, about 2 weeks before I got there, um, uh, Gotti had Paul Castellano murdered out in front of a Stark Steakhouse in Manhattan. And then Gotti became the head of the Gambino crime family. And so we would follow around John Gotti a little bit. A lot of times it was mostly his underlings, people that were um, under him that were involved in other kinds of illegal activity in that. And then we had the other crime families as well. There were 5 crime families in New York at the time, and they're still active today, although maybe not as pervasive as they once were. They're still very active in that. So I know the agents today are working, the or different organized crime cases and that. So anyway, at the time, we were assigned to maybe follow one particular individual or another see who they met with, see what they did. Um, we had some really interesting characters. I remember, and you got to keep in mind that the mobsters all had different names. They had the real first name or something, and then they had a tack on name. For example, everyone seemed to have a nickname like Joseph Joe Bananas Bonanno, John Johnny Sausage Barbato, Anthony Whack Whack Indelicato.
Is there a formula to
Tommy.
this name? Like, was there a reason? I'm very
Yeah,
I'm
that's
curious.
there was something that they did, or whatever they were they were given a nickname. So
So it's
you
your
can
first name plus an activity
and it's
equals.
like Anthony Whack Whack and Delicato. Guess what he did?
I can guess. Now I just want to know what my mom name would be. Now it's like circulating in my head right now.
Tommy Sneakers, Cacciapoli. You got Tommy the Toupee Bilotti. My my favorite one was Tommy Karate Patera. And let me tell you a little bit about this guy. He was probably in his 40s at the time, average height, average looking guy. But apparently he'd taken a lot of karate when he was growing up, and he worked for one of the mobsters. He was one of the ones that if you didn't go along with the program, you'd end up seeing Tommy, and he'd invite you to his social club, which is the
Pause
place.
1 second. Fast forward 2 seconds if you do not want to hear some graphic content. Just fast forward a little. Go ahead, Harry.
parental warning there.
Yeah.
Just a little warning.
So Tommy would he was one of the enforcers, and he would make sure that the people in the area that he worked in, that he was in charge of, I guess, if you will, always gave a little bit of money to the mob, and that was really to supposedly to keep them safe and to continue to allow them to remain in business. And if for some reason you didn't get with the program and you refused to pay, or go along with what the mob wanted, Tommy would be one of the ones that would invite you to a social club and get you a couple of drinks downstairs, and then he'd say, "Let's go upstairs and talk." And so he'd take you upstairs, and he basically would give you a final warning that, hey, you got to play ball with us, or you're going to be out of business. The guy told him to go screw himself. Tommy would end up killing him, and Tommy had a bathtub upstairs in his office, and the guy that he killed, he'd put into the bathtub, and he literally would chop him up into pieces, and then he would haul him out through the back door in garbage bags, and take him out to Staten Island to a bird sanctuary and dump the bodies out there and let the birds eat them and that. So I didn't know at the time. I knew that he was responsible for a number of murders. I assumed it was around 12 or so, but I had since learned that they think Tommy was probably responsible for over 60 murders.
Wow.
Yeah. And so anyway, to make a long story short, that's just one guy that we worked on. And so, as you know, this kind of work can be very, very dangerous. And so we had to have our heads on a swivel all the time, had to be prepared for anything. If we were sitting in a neighborhood, with the mob guy down the street, for example, and we happened to sit out in front of somebody's house, and they saw us there, they might think that they were there for them, that we were there for them, and they were maybe in drug trade or whatever. They may want to try to kill us, thinking that we were watching them. So, or, they would tell, if they knew that the mob guy down the street, lived in their neighborhood, they'd make it a point of telling them. So, and it was just very dangerous work. We had to constantly be, our heads on a swivel and looking around and paying attention to things. I think it's important for people to know that there's really like 3 different kinds of surveillance. There's the mobile surveillance, like I was on the SO2 squad where we followed people around. And when they met with somebody, we would go ahead and take pictures of them. If they went into a restaurant or a bar, we'd have to be ready to jump out and take what we call take a leg and go in and sit down and see what they were doing inside, who they were meeting with. So we constantly had to be ready to, get out on foot if we needed to. Then you had your fixed surveillance, and let's say we knew that there was a social club where a big meeting was going to take place, and we wanted to identify all the mobster-related people that were going into the social club. We would park a van down the street, and basically we'd have 2 people, one in the back, at the back of the van, and we're talking about, a panel van where, people can't see in through a window or something like that.
The vans I avoid in the parking lot. Those kind of vans.
Yes, right.
Yes, the ones that we're trained to avoid at all costs.
And then we had a driver of the van, and so they'd pull into a good spot. They'd communicate with us in the back of the van and say, hey, is this a good spot? We'd tell them yes. They'd turn the van off, get out, lock it up, and then walk away. And they'd walk down the street and then get picked up by another agent. And so we were in the van. I would be in the van, or whoever was assigned the van that day, for hours at a time. And it could be 90, if it was 90 degrees outside, imagine how hot it is in that van. It was over 100 degrees. You're sweating.
Oh,
You're constantly taking water, but you can't move. You can't get out because your assignment is to take, video or photos of who's meeting, and they just can't keep running people in and out. So, or you'd attract attention. So it was not uncommon that we would spend an entire shift inside of a van. And
Okay, but I hear a problem coming.
yeah, I
We're
do
drinking
too.
a lot of water, and some of it's coming out in perspiration, but
But not
there's
all of
another
it.
way for it to come out, Harry.
Well, and again, that's surveillance. You have to be prepared to stay in your car literally the entire day, and or shift, and shifts could be 10 hours long. So I mean, you might be in your car for 14 hours a day. When you talk about your commute, 2 hours there, 2 hours back, and then your work assignment. So you had to have some food, but you had to have plenty of water. And I remember, just like Jessica said, most of it would come out in perspiration and that, but then you had to have your trusty, pee bottle.
Oh no.
That's your pee bottle? You brought your pee bottle?
From New York. This is my baby.
He's hugging his pee bottle for those that are just listening.
Believe
That
me,
is a new sight for me today.
hey, look, it's a large mouth too.
Uh-huh.
But no, it's
Thought went into what the pee bottle needs to be successful.
Yeah, you want the biggest target possible.
But you needed to find something like this because if you were in a position where you couldn't just get out of your van or get out of your car and go find a bathroom, you had to relieve yourself in a bottle. Now think about the girls and the women that were on the team.
I think they needed a funnel. I can't think of any other way. And I actually was thinking about that. How would they do that?
Well, if they were assigned in the van, we had a potty there, that they could use. But if they were in their vehicles, which they were 99% of the time, before the shift started, they'd have to go around and try to find a fast food restaurant or a deli that would allow people to use their restroom. Back in the day, and it may still be there this way as far as I know, but they would lock the bathrooms and only customers could use the restroom. So oftentimes the women would have to buy something in order to be able to use the restroom. And so they had to try to identify those locations ahead of time. So, even though peeing in a bottle was not a lot of fun, the women certainly had it a lot rougher than we did. And
I thought potty training on the go was difficult. And
oh,
now I'm like, this is way worse. This like doesn't
oh,
end.
can you imagine being, and this actually happened many times, being downtown Manhattan, in Times Squares with people, broad daylight, people walking by your car constantly, and you have to go to the bathroom and you can't leave your spot. So what we had to do was we always had like a coat or a newspaper we could throw over our lap, and then we would discreetly go into our bottle. And you got people, right next to you walking by, and all they'd need to do is, see little Johnny in your hand. they'd be calling, they'd be calling the cops on you. So
Now I know why New Yorkers just look straight ahead.
Yeah.
Just
You don't
straight
wanna see-
ahead.
Yeah. I don't see nothing. I don't see nothing.
I don't want to see nothing, that's for sure. But anyway, so those were the trials and tribulations of working surveillance. And again, I thought it would be funny to keep it, since it was so valuable to me in New York. And again,
It's clean,
fun,
right?
and it's
Like you've cleaned it.
yeah.
Okay,
And
just checking.
actually, I keep it in my car today. Or if Barb and I go on a long trip, and all of a sudden I've gotta go.
You just want to show off your talent.
Yeah. No, no, I don't know about the talent anymore. And it would not be unusual for an agent to accidentally pee all over himself trying to use his bottles.
God.
So anyway, we digress. But
That's okay. Now,
That's-
what are the best surveillance snacks? Because I would imagine crackers, too messy, too crumbly, chips, same way. So you really probably had to put a lot of thought into what you packed for a snack.
Well, first of all, surveillance agents would pack food for the day. So maybe a sandwich, like Jessica said, maybe some snacks. Typically, those would, I was a lot healthier then than I am now. So, so I would have, maybe some carrot strips, celery strips, just other kinds of vegetables and that to munch on, some apples, bananas, things like that. And you might treat yourself and throw in a candy bar or something for a snack. But you pretty much had to assume you would not be able to get out and go through a fast food restaurant or into a deli. So you had to be self-sufficient. And that was another thing the surveillance agents had to keep in mind is we may start following somebody in Long Island, and they head up to Cape Cod, for example. We'd have to follow them all the way up to Cape Cod or wherever they're going. So we had to have an overnight bag as well and be prepared to go on a trip. I've had, it didn't happen to me, but I've had fellow agents that followed somebody to an airport and had to jump on a plane and with the bad guy to see where they were going and who they were meeting with. So, it was, very trying sometimes. You had to be prepared for just about anything. And I had mentioned that there's moving surveillance, fixed surveillance, where you're taking pictures of, maybe a meeting or who's going in and out of a location, either photographs or video. And then there's electronic surveillance. And electronic surveillance really was kind of a interesting thing. There are a number of different kinds of electronic surveillance. You might do a wiretap, for example. You might insert a microphone into a social club or some type of a business. You might put a tracking device on the bumper of a car or underneath the car so that it would help you follow the individual. There were a lot of different things that amounted to electronic surveillance, tape recording, like I said, wiretaps. But one of the most dangerous ones that I think that we ever did was when we had a couple of squads that were made up of individuals who were very capable of installing microphones, and they were our tech agents in that, and they would um, there would be a whole process of breaking into a social club, for example, and keeping in mind that the mobsters were probably upstairs playing cards. So you had to break into the social club, go down into the floor below where the mobsters were, and drill up into the floor and put a microphone up so you could hear what they were talking about. And of course, all these things would require a court order to do this, but the whole process started. A lot of the social clubs had gates and things that came down, and they would have a key lock where you'd have to insert a key and open it. We would during the day, our surveillance team would go up, and when it looked like there were nobody around or whatever, we would stick a camera up to the keyhole and take a picture of it, and we would send that picture to our unit that made the keys and things for breaking in. And based on the photograph, they could see where the key notches were and things. And so they would make a key to fit that lock. And so when it
Hmm.
came time to break into the resident or to I'm sorry, the business or the social club, there would be a key made that they could unlock the gate and that, and then go on in from there. But it was such a scary thing for me to um, be in a position where you've got agents whose lives are at risk. They're actually inside a business or a social club where there are mobsters, most likely, most of them, if not all of them, are armed. Um, and they're upstairs, and if they heard something or discovered the agents inside, who knows what would have happened to them.
Let's
And
not forget what Tommy Karate did to people in
yeah,
his social club.
yeah, absolutely. The good news, one thing I didn't mention before, is that there was kind of an unwritten rule with the mob that they tried to avoid killing law enforcement people. Um, Not saying that they wouldn't if they needed to, but what they were afraid of mostly, it was kind of like a professional courtesy. They realized we were doing our job and they were doing their job. And so there was kind of a mutual respect that they had for law enforcement. And they also knew if they killed a law enforcement, maybe an agent or another cop or something, they'd have the full um, uh, weight of the law enforcement response on them. And that would really cause some issues for them and that. So there was again, I guess, an unwritten rule that they would try to avoid killing a law enforcement officer. But again, at that time, if you got somebody breaking into your club, you shoot first and ask questions later. So it was very dangerous. Oftentimes we had neighborhoods that knew that the mob uh, folks had a social club there or a business there, and they'd actually be on lookout all the time. And if they saw something unusual, if they saw somebody hanging out, they'd notify the mobsters and say, "Hey, there's a guy out there. Um, he's been spending a lot of time in a car outside of your business and that," and would provide tip information to the mobsters. So we had to be very careful of that. And on the day of the break-in, for example, or the evening of the break-in, um, sometimes we'd have to dress as electrical workers, as garbage men, um, like we're involved in collecting garbage, for example, out in front of the club. And then a couple of guys sneak into the club and the rest of the guys get on. We actually had garbage trucks that we used or electrical vehicles that we'd borrow and use those as a ruse to allow us to get close and actually get a couple of guys to be able to get inside the social club and that. So it took a lot of planning and preparation, and that's one of the things we did on the surveillance is we noted what time things happen. So if we know that the garbage is collected at 3 o'clock in the afternoon on Thursday, we would maybe try to plan some kind of an activity around that time. Or if we know the only thing we could do, we got to do a night break-in, we could pretend like we could cut the power to a particular light, and we could send our electrical crew there to fix the light. And while they're there, of course, once the neighbors saw, oh, there's some work guys working on the light, they would then, not pay too much attention. And we would be able to sneak in a couple of guys in through the into the club and that downstairs. So, it took a lot of planning and preparation, and uh, just those were the days that were one of the most stressful for me, is knowing that I had fellow agents in there and um, that they were kind of at the mercy of whatever happened. And
And you mentioned that unwritten rule where the bad guys did not want to kill law enforcement officers for a variety of reasons, but there was always that case of mistaken identity. There are rival gangs, there are rival crime families out there. And one of the risks those agents are running when they're in there is they might be mistaken for a rival mobster. And again, as you said, the guys you were looking at might shoot first and ask questions later.
exactly. So, again, um, our guys breaking into the club and installing the mics and that would not have, FBI jackets on. So,
Right.
like Clark said, it could, they could be another mob guy from a different family, or, it could be anybody that's trying to cause an issue for him. So, yeah, that it would be shoot first and ask questions second. And I just want to also mention, the how difficult it is to do a moving surveillance. And I want everybody to think about a time when you were following a family member or a friend, somebody who actually wanted you to follow them um, back to their house or to a restaurant or whatever that you didn't know where it was. So you start off your friend or your family members in front of you, and let's say you're driving in your car and you got all this traffic and things around you, and all of a sudden you come up on a light, your friend or your family member gets through, but you get stuck at the light. So now your family or friend, member sees that you're stuck, so they kind of pull over or go slow until you get through the light and then catch up. Well, that can be tough sometimes for you to stay up with somebody. imagine if you're an agent working surveillance, especially in New York City with all the traffic and that. Imagine that you're working a surveillance on a mobster and they get through a red light, and you don't. And they're getting farther ahead. They're getting mixed up into all the other cars and that. You're going to lose them every time if you don't somehow stay on them. So oftentimes we had sirens in our cars and things. And if we were stuck at a light, we'd let the bad guy get, farther up the road, maybe to the next block, and then we'd have to bust a light. We, turn on our siren, whoop, whoop, and, get in. I've had to go up on sidewalks, go the wrong way on streets to catch up. It's really a difficult thing, and if it's critical that you are staying on the mobster because they're involved in something that could result in somebody's life being taken, for example, you can't run the risk of losing them. You have to stay up with them. Fortunately, a lot of the times we had aircraft, some of the FBI planes that were able to get up to usually around 5,000 feet, maybe 3 to 5,000. I couldn't use a helicopter because it makes too much noise, but we would have an aircraft where you have the pilot and somebody who's a spotter, keeping an eye on the vehicle and that, and calling out. We would let the plane have the eye, if you will. They were the ones that were keeping the eye on the vehicle. But you had to keep in mind, you had to have an agent close enough because let's say, you're at 3,000 feet or 5,000, you happen to look away for a second and look back. And now you were following a white Cadillac. Now there's 3 white Cadillacs, which are not that uncommon in New York City. You know, which one is the bad guy? So you always had to have an agent that kept close enough so that they could, if the plane had difficulty, keeping an eye on a vehicle, like going between buildings or, under a bridge or something like that, that the agent would be able to get the plane back on the right path. But again, imagine how difficult it is for you to follow somebody who doesn't want to be followed, who assumes that law enforcement is following them. And they do what we call dry cleaning techniques. So let's say I'm going to go meet so-and-so, Joey Bag of Donuts for the day. And it's you. You're going to meet him at a restaurant. So you get in your car, you know that there's a good chance that there might be a Fed on you, somebody, FBI guy. And so you're constantly looking in the mirrors, seeing who's following you and that. If they see somebody that seems to be following them, they're not going to go for the meeting. They're going to go someplace else and try again some other time. So you got to constantly realize that they're dry cleaning. They're going along a road and they think someone's following them, or maybe they're just what we call dry cleaning. They pull into a lot and they come out and go the other direction, or they pull into a parking lot and see what cars go by. It's obviously you can't pull into the same lot and get behind them because they'll notice that you pulled off. So these are people that are professional dry cleaners, if you will. Individuals who know that there's a good chance they're being followed, and so they're doing everything they can. I've had bad guys go out on the interstate and they drive 30 miles an hour to see what cars slow down and try to stay behind them or go on past. And it's just very difficult to follow somebody when they don't want to be followed.
Why is it
At the
called dry
time, there-
cleaning?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Why is it called dry cleaning it? Is it because you're like going to pick up your dry cleaning?
Well, yeah,
I
I
was
don't
trying
know.
to figure it out.
We call it, when you clean yourself, you
Oh, that
feel
makes sense.
yeah, if you feel like you're being followed, you want to try to clean yourself so you don't have anybody on you. All right. You get rid of the dirt or whatever.
Got it. That's way better than my explanation.
Yeah. So
So,
at the
yeah,
time, there a surveillance team like you, as you were a member of, Harry. It was five vehicles, 6 agents. Now, what was that sixth agent for?
well, there would be, it would depend, Clark. We would have 5 or 6 agents. Most of them would, and all of them would have their own vehicle, unless there were times where we knew we had intelligence from a wiretap or something or from a source that Joey Bag of Donuts was going to go meet, Frosty. And it's, you know, so that was going to require some walking. So one of the agents would dump their car off, park their car, and get in with another agent. So as they're driving, and Joey Bag of Donuts gets off, parks, and starts walking, um, the agent that was buddied up with one of the other agents would get out, and we called him our leg man or woman, depending on what you were at the time. And that person would be the one that would follow them on foot in that, and see where they go, would go into a restaurant with them, or, something like that. So, and then at the end when the subject came back out to head home or head to another meeting or whatever, then the agent that dropped the leg man off would swing by, pick that agent up, and then they'd go together to either back to the agent's car, or to drop him off so he could have his own vehicle back, or they'd move on to the next thing. And surveillance in general can be extremely boring. So if you're assigned to, Tommy Karate one day, and Tommy's got an upset stomach and he's staying home, and you're just sitting there the whole time, we had an eye, somebody that had the eye is the one that is got the best view of maybe subject's house or business, and that person's looking for that person to come out. Uh, then the person that has the eye says, okay, guys, he's out. He's walking northbound on Broad, or westbound on Broad, or whatever. And so that would alert the other agents to be ready. We might have some movement. And then we would all be spread out into the area. We would typically have somebody ahead of the subject's vehicle, couple of behind. We might even have 1 or 2 agents on side streets. And when that subject starts to move, the person with the eye calls it out and says, okay, he's on the move. He's going westbound on Broad. Um, Usually another car would pull out, and, that wasn't close to where the subject's vehicle was parked, and fall behind. It would look just like a regular person, leaving their area. The eye would stay stationary until the surveillance had moved a little bit out of the area, and then the eye would fall back into the rotation behind the other agents that are now following them. And whoever happened to be number one behind the subject would become the eye. And they would say, okay, subject is making a left-hand turn on, Avenue Street or something like that. And they would make the turn with them if they hadn't been on them very long, or they'd drive on by, and the next agent behind the person that had the eye would make the left-hand turn. So you're constantly giving the subject different looks, different vehicles. If you had the same vehicle all the time, It wouldn't take long, especially somebody that expects to be followed. It wouldn't take long for them to determine that, in fact, the car that's been following them and made several turns with them is probably the FBI. So you had to constantly rotate the eye and make sure you were giving the bad guys a different look.
Now you've mentioned vans, you mentioned the the airplanes, and you mentioned the cars. Your surveillance team, because your offsite was located near the Hudson River up in Terrytown, you guys had a boat, which I would imagine came in pretty handy in certain circumstances.
Oh, it was. We were the team that if we had tip information, source information, or maybe we picked up on a wiretap that there was going to be a meeting, maybe somewhere off the shore, in a bay area or something like that along the water, we would we had a crew. I was on the boat crew, and we would load up. We'd put some food. We had our fishing rods, but on the other hand, you can't sit there in your suits and ties and all of that and think somebody's not going to notice you. So you got to blend in with what people do on the water.
Right.
And so, we had a boat that we used, and we would take it on down into wherever the meeting was going to take place, and we'd park somewhere in there, offshore. And we had video recording equipment and cameras and that we could take photos and things of the meet and that and who was there. And of course, we'd have to actually fish and that. I mean, you can't sit there and not do anything.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you had to look the part. I mean, you can't just expect people aren't watching you to see what you're doing. If a strange boat pulls into an area that nobody's seen that boat before or something, you're just sitting there and you're not fitting in, you're going to draw attention and people are going to find out about it. So that was one of the fun things that we got to do. I enjoyed being out on the boat. I was really close to being sent to the Coast Guard school. But I ended up getting transferred before I went to the Coast Guard school. So that would have been a neat thing too. I would have loved being, trained on how to be a real captain and all of that.
Hi, Captain.
Yeah. Hope you didn't buy the hat ahead of time. All right. Well, by land, by sea, by air, the FBI is keeping an eye on the bad guys for us. Jessie, what are your takeaways from this segment?
Well, I want to start with the fact that number one, surveillance is an art form. I had no idea the amount of work it would take to do surveillance. Everything from how you drive to the sixth man to the type of snacks and the special bottle for all necessary trips. All jokes aside, it is incredibly intense. And I think we see it in movies and we think it looks easy. And Harry very clearly described to all of us that it is very much an art form and it takes special skills to do that. The second takeaway I would say is just the sacrifices that our agents go through and their families. As we've been talking to Harry throughout lots of different episodes, I've heard so many things I didn't even realize that you all do just because it's part of the job. And I think that's so admirable. And Harry would never say that. And I'm sure many of our agents today working would not say that. But we appreciate you and all you're willing to do for us. And the third, I came up with mob names for you too. Are you ready?
Oh, yes.
Harry, tea in a bottle, Trombitas. And Clark, the investigator, Donley.
No.
Yep, Harry and his bottle.
All right. Well, sometime one of these episodes, maybe we're going to come up with a mob name for you.
Oh, I'm scared. Jessie doesn't get enough sleep. Hemmelgarn.
All right. Jessie, the producer, Hemmelgarn, where can people go to find this podcast and like it and share and do everything it takes to keep us going?
We are on all your favorite podcast platforms, as well as YouTube, social media, and our website.
And our retired FBI Special Agent Harry Trombitas, for Jessie, the producer, I'm Clark Donley. We'll see you next time.
Off the Record, an FBI Agent's Perspective is created and hosted by Clark Donnelly, Harry Trombitas, and Jessie Hemmelgarn. Produced by Jessie Hemmelgarn. Stories in this podcast are inspired by Harry Trombitas' autobiography, Dark Places, about his time in the FBI. Music is called Cruise in the Back and is available on Storyblocks. You can find this podcast on all your favorite podcast platforms, YouTube, and on our website.